from this beautiful.
No,
Okay.
Yaakov, I don't want parents to have to get ripped out by people tomorrow.
Oh yeah. Okay, zok the Mishnah. Yeah, on the Samach of Mazel Tov, that ball, Mazel Tov on the Einakut. Shavalana Nach. Zok the Mishnah on Samach Vavam Abayt. Yeah, so tonight gets a little bit technical. I thought it was harder, the Gemara initially, than it really is. But now we get it from pretty much for the rest of the way, from the Masechta, is all about yichus, not the yichus that we like to talk about, the legitimate yichus, meaning what's a mutter, what's a marriage that's mutter, what's a marriage that's asa, when are kids mamzerim, when are they not mamzerim, when does the yichus go after the mother, when does the yichus go after the father. Right? So Zok the Mishnah. Yeah, Kol Mokum Sheyesh Kiddushin. So there's a few, we have to pay attention to this Mishnah because the next Amud gets technical with the terminology that's used in the Mishnah. So it says Kol Mokum. So right off the bat, we have to remember that anytime the Mishnah says Kol Mokum, that means it's coming to add something that for whatever reason the Mishnah doesn't want to say beferish. It says Kol Mokum is coming to include something. It says Kol Mokum Sheyesh Kiddushin Ve'ein Avera. There's a marriage and there's no Avera, right? That's your standard marriage, right? So you hope, right? There's a Kiddushin and there's no Avera involved, right? Havlad Hoylech Achar HaZochar, so then the Vlad goes after the Zochar. Ve'ezuzu. Now Ve'ezuzu is another Lashon, that's mashma. Which ones does this apply to? Mashma that there's others that are not included in this, that seemingly should be. Right, so that's the two diyukim that the Gemara is going to make, is the Kol Mokum and the Ezuzu, right? So fine. So the Ezuzu, which marriage is, what is examples of what they go after the father? Kohenes, Leviah, Yisraelis, right? A Kohen goes with his father's a Kohen. A Levi is a Levi, a Yisrael is a Yisraelis. The Nasul Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, and they get married to a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. So you always go after the father, right? There's handling with a case now. I can't get a hold of David Cohn. That a guy wanted a Bali Tshuva, so he's going like a Yisrael, but then somebody sent him a picture of his grandfather's tombstone. Doesn't say Kohen, but it just has the picture of the hands. You know, some Kehanim's tombstone just has the pictures of the hands. That's all it has on there. So I know we have an inordinate amount of Kehanim on this stuff. So it's an interesting thing. So based on that, do we change him to a Kohen or not?
What was the guy's name?
Almost an exact same story as this, and I'm almost positive when I first said on this type of story, you do not paskin based off of a tombstone.
Yeah, okay, could be. Maybe I should tell this guy to call him because he's getting a little agitated. He hasn't gotten a hold of the phone.
I'm almost positive that was the story that I had heard.
Akiva, I know of one story. I don't remember who the posek was, but they did paskin off of a tombstone, but it clearly said Kohen or whatever on it. It wasn't just a picture of hands.
But how do you know Kohen means he's a Kohen?
Well, the guy was about tshuva who he grew up with zero shaykhis to Yiddishkeit.
I just looked at the picture. It does say Kohen. It says Avram ben Reb Nosson HaKohen. It does say Kohen.
So maybe I don't know.
That's a little stronger, but you have to still do research.
Yeah. The guy was nifter in 1976.
What's his last name?
Cohn. He says his name is Cohn.
K. No, it's fun. No, K. Close enough. K. I don't know. Is K a Kohen name?
Not usually.
Yeah, it's short for K. It's short for Kagan.
It is?
Alta aunt when I came to Morocco.
Kagan can be a Kohen name.
I met my alta aunt when I came to Far Rockaway. She's nifted now a number of years away, but she's my father's sister, and she came from Oman. She came over, so I was talking to her. She says the Glansteins are all Kahanim. He had such a like very Russian Kahanim. Glansteins all Kahanim, you know. So yeah, can is also like I never heard anybody say like that can, you know, unless they're from the south or something, whatever.
That is pretty funny. So maybe that's what it is.
She's from the south of White Russia. No, she's from Mevada, right? She lived in Auburn until all the Jews moved out. She was stuck there.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
Well,
so the use of the father.
And if somebody
right?
says he's a coin, you believe him right away?
Rabara, don't rat us out here. We got a good gig going.
Yeah. Saying a guy. Well, in
So then
Sukkot, you
what?
don't
So
need
why
to be.
can't you believe the picture? Like, but so I always had that question. I mean, not to Khalila to chep anybody. Somebody came out of the camps, and he says he's a kohen. So you believe him? There's nobody left. Hashem Yerakim, from his town or from his family. So he says he's a kohen. So he's a kohen. No.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, a guy goes in. The Gabe announces in the shul. Says anybody a kohen here? Right. And the guy says yes. We don't ask him any questions. Right? I think we've discussed this. Which Masechta will we discuss?
There's different.
That has nothing to do.
Sure.
That's cause of COVID to the coin. So that doesn't have an effect on yichus. This is different.
No, but I'm saying we're saying the guy is Nemon, that he's Nemon, right?
Yeah, but it's not negay. It has no real
Neman to get an
ramifications.
aliyah. He's never to
But
get
that's
an
not
aliyah.
gay because what's the difference? So let's call ourselves Kohanim. We don't have to leave
No,
it
but
to
it doesn't have any
these three guys
ramifications.
over here.
It doesn't have any ramifications in yichus of a person. It's only out COVID that we
Rabara,
call
you're
the
gonna have to
kohen.
go out and go sock shopping. You can't just make yourself a kohen. You gotta have to,
You get use your imagination a little bit. This guy calls himself a Cohen, and that he wants to marry a Gerusha, so he calls himself an Ice Cohen. You can't just, you can think of a better case than. Of course, there's enough. There's enough Kaminas, of course.
Yeah, that does come up sometimes.
Oh, my
Anyway.
mother was divorced beforehand. Oh yeah, so then he's got a different issue, And can he duchen, So we don't let a guy says he's a Cohen doesn't mean, he woke up today and he's a Cohen doesn't mean necessarily he lost the
Yaakov, you told me that Maisa with David Cohen that he told the guy he wanted to marry a grusha. He told him that he wasn't really a kohen to begin with.
Yeah, he said if you don't have, he told him you don't have real proof. You don't have real proof. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So let's see. Anyways, Kahuna, Leviah, Yisrael goes Basa the father. Fine. That's case number one in the Mishnah. We got to just keep that in mind. That's case number one is that it's a kosher Kiddushin and a kosher marriage. There's no Averas. Then everything goes with the father. Fine. That's case number one. Case number two. The Chol Mokum Sheyesh Kiddushin v'yesh Avera. So if you have a Kiddushin and you have an Avera, meaning they're not allowed to get married, but if they did, the marriage is considered a marriage and they have to get divorced. Right? Meaning sometimes you have where there's the third case is going to be where the marriage is not even a marriage. No, a guy decides he's marrying his sister, right? So there's no divorce required. It's just marriage never happened. Right? That's the most extreme case. Right? The first case was a regular legit marriage. That goes to the father. The middle case is this one. It's a Kiddushin, but there's an Avera. So Vlad Hoylech Achara Pogum. The Vlad there goes after whichever parent has the issue. Right? Bezuzu, again, Bezuzu means that's the second time the Mishnah has it. Okay, there's two Kol Makam so far, and there's two Ezuzus. Ezuzu are Alman of the Kohen Gadol, and Alman of the Kohen Gadol. Right, that's an Isser Deraisa, but the marriage still works. Grusha v'chalusa l'kohen hedjit, mamzeres sina l'Yisrael, and mamzeres and sina to Yisrael. All these things, and Bas Yisrael and mamzer l'nasan, and a girl, a Jewish girl, to a mamzer l'nasan. So that's case number two. So those are all Aser, but the Kiddushin is a Kiddushin. The Chol Misha'en, the third case, again, the Chol mi she'en lo alav Kiddushin, aval yesh lo ala cherem Kiddushin. That's a very interesting way the Mishnah puts it. If she does not have Kiddushin to you, let's say it's a sister, right? Aval yesh lo ala cherem Kiddushin, but others can marry her. Meaning a mamzeres, nobody can marry. A mamzer, nobody can marry. A nothing, nobody can marry. Right? But this case is where you can't marry her, but others can. Havlad mamzer. Not only is the marriage no good, but the vlad is even a mamzer. Again, this is the third time Ezah in the Mishnah. That's if you sleep with any of the arise in the Torah. Right? Then the fourth case. If nobody has Kedusha, not you and not others, then Havlad Kimoisa, then the Vlad goes with the mother. Okay? That's the daughter of a shivcha and nachris. As we know, unfortunately, with the rampant intermarriage that's going on in the world, right? So there, the marriage is not a marriage. Nobody's allowed to marry them because they're goyim. Therefore, the yichus goes with the mother, which is why you have a lot of times where you have a guy with a Jewish name, like a doctor in a hospital, and you think, oh, he's Jewish, and then really ends up that he's not Jewish. His father was Jewish, but his mother is a guy. Yes, those are the four madregas of marriages. Fine. So now the Gemara asks, Kol makom sheyesh kedushin, right? Any place that has kedushin, meaning if it has kedushin, it is no avera. So we said, and the yichus goes with the father. Is it a rule? The kol makom, a set rule? The kol makom sheyesh kedushin ve'en avera, wherever it's a legitimate marriage and there's no avera. So havlad hoylach achar hazachar. The vlad goes after the zachar, meaning after the father. Harei ger on top of Aleph now. Today's daf. Harei ger shenasa mamzeres. So you have a ger who marries a mamzeres. Right? The yesh kedushin ve'ein avera. It's a kedushin and there's no avera. Meaning, according to this shita, a ger is allowed to marry a mamzer. So a vlad hoylach achar pogum. Right? So the vlad goes after the pogum. The Tanya ger shenos mamzeres. If you have a ger that married a mamzeres, a vlad mamzer. The vlad is a mamzer. Why? Because it goes. If you have a ger, he's legitimate yid. You have a mamzeres. She's not a legitimate yid. I mean, she's a yid, but she's not legitimate, right? So the kid goes after the mamzeres. So what do you see? You see that the kedushin works because the ger is allowed to marry a mamzeres, right? And at least according to Rav Yossi, and the kid is a mamzer, which means it's going after the mother. Our Mishnah just said when it's a legitimate marriage and there's no avera, the yichus goes after the father. So how could that be? Who says the Mishnah goes according to Rav Yossi? Masnisa Rav Yehudi. Our Mishnah goes according to Rav Yehuda. He holds that ger is not allowed to marry a mamzeres. V'yesh kedushin v'yesh avera. So then what we have here is kedushin with an avera, which is the second case in the Mishnah, which then have vlad hoylach achar pogum. In which case the vlad goes after the pogum. Right? We said in the second case of the Mishnah, where the kedushin works, but it's an avera. So we said there, the baby, the kid that comes from such a marriage, goes with whichever is the worst of the status. So okay, so if you hold that a ger marries a ger is now allowed to marry a mamzeres, so then the kid is going to take on the status of the mamzeres, of the mother, because she's the worst of the two. Right? Fine. So why didn't the Mishnah list it? The Mishnah gave a whole list of cases, right? So why didn't it say, according to this teretz, why didn't it say also a ger marrying a mamzeres? So Tana, Morantis, Tana, Kol Makom to say
the first Mishnah in Masara Yuchasin. It must be that's like Rabbi Yossi, but it says Beferish over there that a mamzeres and a ger and a mamzeres could makes so. Not
one mission saying one mission you and one mission like Rabbi Yossi, 100%. Well, we'll see it on Shabbos. Shabbos is tough, yeah. Anyway, so what's the teretz? Tana kol makom to seifa lasuye. When it says kol makom, then that's coming to include this case, right? So meaning part of the Mishnah, because it's part of when it says, we said when we were learning the Mishnah, we said anytime it says kol makom, it's coming to include something. So kol makom is coming to include the case of a ger marrying a mamzeres. That's one teretz. Viva Yisema, Lo'ilam Rav Yossi. We could even say our Mishnah is Rav Yossi. Okay, so then why is the kid considered a mamzer? It should go with the father. But Tana ezuzu l'ma'ute. The terminology ezuzu, which is this, comes to exclude something. So meaning, even though the first case in the Mishnah says that if it's a kosher marriage and the kedushin, the yichus goes after the father, but ezuzu tells you there's an exclusion, and the exclusion to that case would be a ger marrying a mamzeres, in which case the kid is a mamzer, it goes after the mother. Okay, so Gemara says ve'ezuzu v'suloi. Is that the only case that goes after the father? So a cholol is somebody whose father married a grusha, right? So we have a cholol, he's a kind of puzzle, married a bas Yisrael, the yesh kiddushin, there's no avera, right? A guy who's a cholol, a kind who's a cholol, there's nothing wrong with him marrying a Yisrael, right? So yesh kiddushin, ein avera, havlad hoylech achar hazocher. And the vlad goes after the zocher, meaning that the vlad is considered a cholol, right? So you see that there's another case, and the Mishnah doesn't say it. Well, answers Rav Dustai ben Rav Yehuda Svirale. This is going like Rav Dustai ben Rav Yehuda, who we had said before that he says B'nai Yisrael mikvah tahara l'chalolim. He says that B'nai Yisrael are considered a mikvah tahara, and when a cholol marries a bas Yisrael, that makes the kid from that marriage is not a cholol. So therefore, that's not excluded from our Mishnah. Whereas Yisrael should not the cholol. What about the opposite? You have a Yisrael. What did I say? Right. That first case was a chol that's married to a bas Yisrael. Now the opposite. A Yisrael should not the chalola. The yesh kiddushin vein avera. There's a kiddushin then. There's no avera. What's the matter if the Yisrael marries a daughter from whose father was married a grusha, right? Havlad hoylech achar hazocher. So there we say that the vlad goes after the zocher. That's another case that should have been mentioned in the first case. Why is it not mentioned? The Tana kol makom dereisha lasuye. So the kol makom in the reisha is coming to include it. Okay, v'nesanya behedya. Why doesn't it say it openly? Why not say openly this case? Why do you have to hide it behind kol makom? It's a very interesting answer. Because there's no way to teach it in a very concise way. So how are you going to learn this case? Kohenes levia v'Yisraelis v'chalola v'nisas l'koyen levi v'Yisrael v'chalola. You can't say it that way. Meaning the way it says it in the Reisha. What's an example of the yichus going after the father? That's a kohen levi and Yisrael marrying a kohen levi Yisrael. Now you want to mix chalola into it? You can't say that because the chalola the kohen michazik. A kohen cannot marry a chalola, right? I mean, I guess he could, but he's making his kids chalola, right? So there's no way to say it in a very short fashion. So therefore, the Gemara says, you know what, we're going to leave cholol out of it, even though cholol has the same din, and we're going to put it included in the word komaka. Okay, fine. But there's another case, right? So Amar Rabba Barachana, Amar Rav Yechon, Mitzri Sheni, Shanota Mitzri Shena. Oh, so we need a little hakdama here. So there's different people that we're going to see this more on Amad Beis, but normally we accept Gerim from everybody, except we don't take from Ammon or Moav, right, or the Shiva Umas. We don't take from any of them. And Mitzrim are only allowed to marry in after it's a third generation. Third generation Mitzri is allowed to marry in. All right, so Rabbi Yochanan says a Mitzri Sheni, a second generation Mitzri male, Shenasa Mitzris Rishona, that married a first generation Mitzris. Right? Meaning a Mitzri Sheni, Rashi says, is the father became a ger. So it's an interesting thing. These Mitzrim become gerim. If a Mitzri becomes a ger, they know that they can't marry, their kids will not be able to marry Yidden, regular Yidden. Right? They'd have to marry another Mitzri. And then the third generation will be able to marry into Klal Yisrael. Right? So what happened here is a Mitzri Sheni, which means that his kids, meaning Mitzri Sheni means his father was a ger. Right? So that means his kids will be able to be married to Yidden. But he marries a Mitzvah Rishona, in which case, if you go with her yichus, then the kids will not be able to marry. Right? It's fairly straightforward. You have a 2 marrying a 1. So if you go with the father, who's a 2, so then the kids are 3. 3 is allowed to marry a Yid. If you go with the mother's only a 1, so then the kids are going to be a second generation Mitzri. Mamela, the kid will not be able to marry. So who do you go with? So, but the Gemara says, "B'no shlishi havi," the son is a shlishi. So you see, is the case where you go with the father, right? It's a perfectly legitimate marriage. It's a kosher marriage. It's a one ger to another ger, a ger mitzri to another ger mitzri, and right, it's obviously not usher, and you're going with the yichus of the father. Fine. So how come the Mishnah doesn't mention it? The Gemara says, "Tana kol makam dereisha lasuye." The kol makam of the reisha is coming to include it. Ula Rav Dimi dama sheni hava. Okay, what about Rav Dimi, who holds that you go with the mother? And the mitzvah is a sheni. Tana ezuzu lamaute. That's why it says in the Mishnah ezuzu, coming to exclude this case. And even though it's a kosher marriage, it still doesn't go with the father. Fine. That's okay. Those now it's finished with those cases. Now we go back to the original machlokes, which is again, Rabbi Yossi held that a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeres. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that a ger is not allowed to marry a mamzeres. And we have machlokes whether they're in our Mishnah or not. The Gemara asks, I'm sorry, that's the next kasha. This is a different kasha. There's another case. I'm sorry, one more case. When by the Ummah Sa'ilam, right, by the that's not Muslim, but the seven nations that are living in Eretz Yisrael. So the din of the 7 nations that live in Eretz Yisrael was that they have to be killed out. They cannot become Gerim, they cannot become Avadim, they have to be totally killed out. Right? So there was a big argument that came out by again when I was giving the Balchuva share this week, where the one guy said, "What do you mean? We're supposed to kill every single Arab that's in Eretz Yisrael, finished, whether they're good, bad, because that's what the Torah says." So one of the guys wasn't understanding this concept. What do you mean, why are we killing them if they're okay? Because I don't. The truth is, I don't know if they're considered, the Palestinians are considered part of the Shiva Ummah or not. I don't know. But anyways, the din from Minat Torah is that the 7 nations that occupied Eretz Yisrael, or whichever nations were killed out. You could not be Magar them, you couldn't have them as Avadim. Right? Not other nations in the world. So Ba'umah, so the Gemara is saying, Ba'umah is halach achar hazacha. When Goyim are marrying each other, you go after the Zacha, which the Gemara is going to ask some of what does this have to do with us? What do we care about Goyim Zichus if they're marrying each other? Right? This Gairu, once they become Gerim, halach achar apogim shebishneim. Then we go with whichever one is the worst of the two. Meaning, if you have a ger from Ammon Umayyah marrying a Mitzri, so how do you go with it? You go with the worst of the two, which we'll see on Amabez what this means. Either way, so what do you see from this Gemara? That it's a legitimate marriage, but you don't necessarily go after the father. Right? Our Mishnah said when it's a legitimate marriage.
How you bring a raya from a goyish marriage?
No, once they're Nisgayer, you go with the Pogrom Shebishneim. Once they're Megayer, it's a mutter marriage, right?
Then they're brand new people. They're like newborn Jews. You know what I'm saying?
Correct. No, from the Shiva Umas, then they're not allowed to. But if they marry each other, then it's okay.
Why are we trying to bring a raya from the fact that the goyim?
We're not. We're bringing the raya from if they became Gerim. If they became Gerim, so they can marry each other, so then why are you going with the father?
Can I ask?
There's no yichus if they're gerim. There's nothing.
No, but there's different levels. If one is a Mitzri, then eventually they could come. If one is Ammon Umayyah, they can't come in.
So Mitzri is Megayer. The Mitzri is Megayer, the first, second generation, even the third, but they have to do all the mitzvahs. If they Machal Shabbos, they're Chayiv Misa. So it's not the pagam is the pagam that they have is they can't marry another yid until a yid who's not a Mitzri. Where does a Amalek fall into this category?
Amalek is the same as the Shiva Umas, I think. No?
Were they the Shiva? They were. Well, they were Shiva Omas. We have a mitzvah to kill out the Amalek also. So, but
And the Shiva.
Yeah.
We just Amalek gets a lot of the credit, but the Shiva Umas is also, we also got to kill them out too.
It's different. We had a machlokes in Yavamas about the Shiva Umas. If they're living outside Eretz Yisrael with another Ummah, or if we accept Gerim from them, there's no machlokes about Amalek. Amalek is Amalek. We don't accept.
That's true.
We have to kill them, even if they're living in who knows where.
Well, you have the with Amalek too. Most Rishonim hold nowadays there's no mitzvah to kill Amalek, contrary to popular
That's because
belief.
we don't know who Amalek is.
No, because we're not in Eretz Yisrael. Pretty sure most Rishonim.
They say that some Soiva killed an Amaleki. That's Shmuel.
Anyways, okay, so that's the kasha. Why doesn't the blood go after the father? So Gemara says, Tana ezuzu lemute, like we've been saying. That's why the Mishnah has so many kol makams and ezuzus. The ezuzus come to exclude certain cases. Okay, now I'm sorry. Now we're back to the machlokes of Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah whether a ger is allowed to marry a mzeret. The Haimai. What's the case? If you say our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that a ger is not allowed to marry a mamzeret, so kol makam the reisha. So now we got to go through all the kol makam. So kol makam of the reishas lasu yisrael shenasa halal. So it's kol makam of the reishas coming to include a yisrael who marries a bas kayin who was married to a grusha, so she's a halal. With the Rabbi Barachana, and it's also coming to include the case of Rabbi Barachana where a the first generation Mitzri married a second generation, right? Ezuzu l'meute to Rav Dimi for Ravin, and the Ezuzu is coming to exclude the case of Rav Dimi and Ravin, right? Which was what was that case again? Right, but with the umas, so they become gerim, right? On the Amid Bays now. Kol makom the seifa lasuye, and what's the kol makom in the seifa? That's coming to include ger shenas a mamzeret, a ger that marries a mamzeret, right? Elai amar Rabbi Yossi, even if you say it's Rabbi Yossi who holds that a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeret, then kol makom dereisha kidam aron. Kol makom dereisha is coming to, like we said, to include a yisrael that marries a halala. Ezuzu kidam aron, and the ezuzu is like we said, it's coming to exclude Ravin's case or Rav Dimi's case, and also ger shenas mamzeret. Elo kol makom to seifa lasuye mai. So what are you doing with that extra kol makom? What's that kol makom coming to include? He doesn't have anything to include it. And what I asked back, back at you, tamech the Rabbi Yehuda. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, ezuzu to seifa lamali. What's the ezuzu in the last case coming to exclude? Right? Again, we said the word ezuzu is coming to exclude cases. Ela aidi the tana reisha ezuzu. Since the Mishnah said ezuzu, tana seifa ezuzu. Meaning we're trying to keep it aligned. The Mishnah. I don't think aligned is the right word. Whatever. We're trying to keep it uniform. Right? So it says ezuzu in the reisha, so we'll say ezuzu in the seifa. So hachanami. I did Tana Reisha Kol Makom, Tana Nami Sefer Kol Makom. It says in the Reisha Kol Makom, so in the Sefer it also says Kol Makom. Okay, so that's why the Mishnah is so stocked with Kol Makoms and Ezuzus. Fine. Now we go back to the case that Zev was asking about. Yeah, Gufa. Ki Asa Rabban Amar Rav Yochanan, but Umas Halach Achar Zacha. By Umas we go after the Zacha. Nisgairu, meaning if two goyim marry each other, the yichus goes with the father. That's part of the way we go with. Right? Nisgairu, if they became gerim, halach achar pogim shebeshneim. Then we go after the pogim shebeshneim. So my beumas halach achar zachar. What does this mean that by goyim you go after the zachar? So Rashi says, meaning as long as they're not gerim, who cares?
Wouldn't there be a shaila if they're allowed to live in the land?
Well, whether we have to kill them.
Right. I'm saying, wouldn't that still apply even after they conquered the land?
Yeah.
So then wouldn't that be a very simple teretz? You would need to know where do you go busting?
Oh, so exactly. So that's sort of what the Gemara is going to give a teretz, I think. I think this will answer your question. Let's see. Kedatani, like we learned in a brayta. Yeah, Brisa in Yavamas, which I don't think I had any recollection of. All right, Gershon obviously remembered it. I had no recollection. Get the Tanya. Minayin le'echad min ha'umas. How do you know that one of the umas? Now again, the umas means the shiva amanim, and they're mechuyed to be killed. So they cannot become gerim and they cannot become avodim. They're supposed to be killed. So minayin le'echad min ha'umas sheba ala kananis. No, I'm sorry. Mina umas is not. I'm sorry. Umas is umas, nations. Nations not from the Shiva umas. Right? The male in this marriage is like a stomach guy. Yeah. Sheba ala Kananis. He's sleeping with a Kananis who we're not allowed to let live. V'hoyled ben, and then they have a son. Okay, so again, the father, if you go with the yichus of the father, the kid is a ger. If you go with the yichus of the mother, then you got to kill the kid, right? So which one? So right. So again, minayin le'echad min ha'umas sheba kananis v'hoyled ben she'ata r'shay l'knoisa be'eved. How do you know that you're allowed to buy him as an eved? Meaning, and we don't have to kill him out, which means we go with the father. It says, and from the people that are living by you, that you are allowed to buy them. All right, so therefore, we learn out that that's going to go with the father. Yeah? Fine. Yochel af eved, the baal shivcha min ha'umas, v'hoyled ben. Now this is the opposite. An eved, which you have to look at the girsa, because what does eved have to do with anything? So that's why they change it. Means a kanani, or eved kanani. So here the male is the one that can't come into Eretz Yisrael. The female can. Shabal al shivcha min ha'umas v'hoyled ben. So you would think shata rashay l'knoisa be'eved. In this case too, you would be able to buy it as an eved. Meaning here, you'd go with the mother. That they give birth in your land. You're allowed to buy slaves from those that are born in your land, and not ones that move in. Right? So therefore, the Torah is telling you that kids that come from Canaanim and non-Canaanim, right, go with the father. That's all. Right? So that's where it's Negeya, where we have to know about yichus by goyim. Again, you have one of the shiva umas marrying a regular goy. So and then we want to buy this guy as an eved. So the question is, do you have to kill the guy or not? So that's all going to be dependent on whether yichus goes with the mother or the father. So that's when we're concerned for yichus of goyim. Fine. This guy ru halach achar pogum shebishneim, and if they become gerim, then you go after the pogum shebishneim. So this is very interesting because it really turns this whole sugya on its head. But what's the case? Let's say we're talking about a mitzri, a male mitzri, right? And he's the first generation, right? So that means his kids will not be able to marry Yidden. But he married an Amoinis, right? And a female Amoinis, we don't have to kill. It's only the male Amoini. I should have pointed that out before. Male Amoini and Moavis and the Shiva Umas are not allowed. Shiva Amim are not allowed to come into Klal Yisrael, but the females are. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a male Mitzri that married an Amoinis who was perfectly mutter to come into Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, "My pogam ika." Right? What's the pogam? Amoini v'lei Amoinis. It only says that a male Amoini is not allowed to Klal Yisrael, not a female. So there's no pogum here. Meaning, yes, there's a pagam off the Mitzri, but the Mitzri is also allowed to be Yid. He just can't get married. So there's no pogum, right? Ella Amoini shenosa Mitzri. We're talking about an Amoini, meaning the male Amoini who's not allowed to come into Klal Yisrael, who married a Mitzri. So if you go with the father, the kid can't come into Klal Yisrael. If you go with the mother, then the third generation will come in. These Zachar Havi Hai. So now it's this kid that comes out of this marriage. Again, the male is not allowed to come into Klal Yisrael. The mother, the female, is allowed to. Her kids will eventually, or the grandkids. So if he's a Zachar Havi Hai, the Shadia Basreti Day, then we're going to have to go after him. Meaning, if this son goes after the father, he's not allowed to come into Klal Yisrael, right? But if it's a girl, then we send it after the mother, who is more of a pagam. Meaning, again, we said that once they become gerim, we go with the pagam, whoever is more pagam. So if it's a male, so the male is not allowed to. If he goes with the father, he's not allowed to come into Klal Yisrael. If he go with the mother, then he will be, or at least his kids will be able to. So you go with the pagam, right? But if it's a female, so then if it's a female, so you go after. You have two choices. You go with the father, then she's fine because she's a female. Females are allowed to come into Klal Yisrael. And if you go with the mother, then she's not fine, right? So therefore, then you would go with the mother because like this, she can't come into Klal Yisrael, right? Because she's still only second generation Mitzri. Okay, it's a little technical, but that's fine. Now, okay, we're out of that sugya. Now we're just trying to figure out the one that we all understand is that if there's no Kiddushin and then there's Avera, then it's a mamzer. So how do you know? How do you know a kid's a mamzer? Minani mili. So how do we know? Well, the truth is it's really machlokes Rashi Tosfos what the minani mili is. According to Rashi, minani mili is how do we know that if there's going to be anybody that has a chiyuv kares, the marriage is not a marriage. We were just assuming that when there's a chiyuv kares or a chiyuv misa, and they marry each other, the marriage is not a marriage. How do we know that? Right? And then as a side thing, how do you know that the kids would be mamzer? Right? So and Tosfos says it a little differently. So anyways, some say B'Shem Rabbi Yanai, but Rav Acha prayed the Rava. She goes out of her house and she goes to a different man. She can go get married. A woman gets divorced. She can go to others and not to her relatives. So you see that it's relatives that's an issue, and that would be chiyuv kares. Maybe it just means that she's allowed to go marry somebody else, but she's not allowed to marry the son of her husband. So when it says ben behedyuk, that we have a fair pasuk. It says loyikach ishes eshes aviv. A man is not allowed to take the wife of his father. So we know that pasuk already. So acher lamali, fine. So why does it have to say the word acher? So therefore the pasuk that's what's coming to tell you that a woman is allowed to marry others and not relatives. Okay, so when I ask for Amy Idi Leben, then maybe they're both coming to tell you your son. One is telling you that you're not allowed to marry the son lechatchila, and and one is telling you that b'di'evid, it's not doesn't even work b'di'evid. Meaning, even if they do get married, the marriage is not a marriage. And when it says lechatchila, lechatchila, then it's also we learned it out from the sister of your wife. So Achais Isha marrying the sister of your wife when your wife's alive is kares, and there's no marriage. So Chayv Mrs. Bezdin, like Kol Shekain, Chayv Mrs. Bezdin, which is more chamer than kares. So if it's in the Kol Shekain that the marriage is not a marriage and the kids are being mamzer. So it says, well, maybe both still coming to say about your wife's sister. Halachatchila Di'evan, one is Lachatchila, one is Di'evan. Well, it says in a Chanami, maybe it's Haka, that's what the pasuk is coming for. So then Ashkachan Achos Isha. So then that tells us, okay, so it's telling you Achos Isha would make a mamzer. Shar Arayas, so then how do we know about the other Arayas? Achos Isha, we learn it out from Achos Isha. Ma Achos Isha miyuchedes. She erva b'chayav and all the karas lashing does a chatos. So like talks about Kiddushin, she's considered an erva. You chayiv karas if you sleep with her, and if you did a b'shagi, it's a chatos, and Kiddushin doesn't work. Afkol she erva b'chayav and all the karas lashing does a chatos. Like talks about Kiddushin. So anything that's an erva and the chayiv karas and shigal chatos, there's no Kiddushin. Fine. The Gemara says, but you can't necessarily learn out all right, because Mishlam Akulu Asian, you can learn out everything. But Ella Eishes Ish Eishes Ach, but an Eishes Ish, and the wife of your brother, you can have kasha, because equal and mifrach, you can have kasha. Malach is Isha shekain ein la heter b'makom mitzvah. The sister of your wife, you don't have a heter b'makom mitzvah. I mean, there's no such thing as yibum. Tamer be'eshes ach, the brother's wife, sheyesh la heter b'makom mitzvah. There's a kula there that doesn't apply to other arayas, which is that when the brother dies without kids, so his brother is allowed to marry his wife, and he's mechuyev to marry his wife. So, how can you learn it out from there? It has a different status. And Eishes Ish Nami, your standard Eishes Ish, equal to Mifrach, Malahano, Shekain Ein La Heter B'chai Oitzen. All these cases of Arayas, when they're alive, then there's no Heter. Right? Meaning a guy is not allowed to marry his wife's sister when she's alive. However, Eishes Ish, Sheyesh La Heter B'chai Oitzen, there is a Heter in the life when the guys are still alive. I mean, once she gets divorced, she's mutter. So therefore we can't learn it out. It says anybody who does any of these abominations will get cursed. We make a hekesh of all the arayas to the sister-in-law. Just like the sister-in-law Kiddushin doesn't work. All arayas like Kiddushin doesn't work. Okay. If that's the case, this is the major kasha. Afilu nida nami. If that's the case, and you're saying anything that has chorus shouldn't have a good marriage, then how about a nida? Nida's chorus. So if you're makadosh an isha who's a nida, so the Kiddushin doesn't work. Right? That's why neither any difference. A guy is boil a nida or a saita. A saita is meaning when he's accusing his wife, he's not allowed to be with her until they figure out the accusation. And if he did, it's also, but the vlad's not a mamzer, shein a vlad mamzer. So how come by those two vikaras the vlad is not a mamzer? Her nida will be on her. Afilu b'shas nidasa teheba. Even when she's a nida, you're still married to her. Which is why you're allowed to stay with your wife, even though she's a nida. Fine, but then what I said. So 1 second. So we have psukim by arayas. We can either compare them to achos isha, and therefore the marriage is not a marriage and the kids are mamzerim, or we can compare them to nida, and the marriage is a marriage, and if they're together, there's no mamzer, right? I think I said nida before. It meant mamzer. Right? You have two choices. You can compare all the rights to achos isha, in which case the Kiddushin doesn't work, and if they live together, the kids are mamzer. Or you can go with nida, which the marriage does work, and the kids are not a mamzer. So why do you go with one over the other? So michti, ikul akusha nida, ikul akusha achos isha. You can compare it to nida, you can compare it to achos isha. My chazat to makeshes lu achos isha, akshal nida. Why are you comparing it to achos isha and making everybody else akshal nida? Make a comparison of all arayas to nida. In which case, the Kiddushin will be a Kiddushin. Maybe the kids won't be a mamzer. The Gemara answers, kula v'chumra, l'chumra makshina. And I can't say I understand this rule. When you have a hekesh, you can compare it to a kula, and you can compare it to a chumra. You go with the chumra. Right. So since we have an option to compare it arayas to achos isha, in which case the kids are mamzerim, and the marriage is not a marriage, that's what we're going to go with instead of going with nida, which will be the more makel. Okay, I know it's a little rough. It's a little rough stuff, but we'll stop over here, and we're going to continue with how you know mamzerim, other opinions about mamzerim, and then we start with tomorrow, and then on the base tomorrow is with how do you know that you're not allowed to marry a goy, and that's it, and then we continue with the yichus. All right, the Surah's Taivas, and everybody should have them.